Okay. Okay, well, thanks to Kay for the technical backup, and actually a big thank you because when I was trying to get in through the link just a few minutes ago, we were going to meet just a little bit earlier, then it really wasn't working. So I had to phone Dharma Kosher, and thankfully Kay was there at the end of the phone and talked me through what I needed to do to be able to join today. So a big thank you for that, because those kinds of technical glitches at the last minute can tip me right into the kind of territory that we're going to be looking at today. So I was glad to be rescued there. So thank you. And well, a warm welcome to everyone this morning. This kind of is a virtual shrine room. I was saying just before, as we were just gathering, it felt a bit like sitting there on my cushion next to the shrine in the shrine room, just waiting for people to gather. And it's kind of like that's what we've been doing. That's what's been happening. We've been gathering, and maybe some more people will be coming to join us as the time goes on. So this morning, I think I've got about an hour, is that right, Kay? Yeah. And so we'll be spending this time together, and we're not in the same physical space, in that we're not in the shrine room at Dharma Kosher. But what's been becoming more and more apparent to me as I'm getting more used to this online way of communicating with people is that actually we might not be in the same close proximity, but it doesn't actually feel like we're separate either. I know that this is a big teaching within the tradition of things being interconnected, but sometimes it takes actual circumstance to feel the truth of that a bit more deeply. And especially when I've been meditating, and I've been asking myself, well, where's the boundary here? You know, what is it that actually separates me from everyone that I know is meditating at this time? And actually, in those moments, I can't find that boundary. You know, it is something that the mind adds in. You know, it sees walls, it has an idea of distance, and we kind of create this sense of how things are. But there are different ways to experience it, and at a time like this, I think it's a real opportunity to feel those other ways of being that, you know, we understand, we kind of maybe know in a more theoretical way, but we can feel them a bit more fully for ourselves at this time. So having said that, this morning I am going to be talking for a little while. It's said in the information that I'd be referring to a particular sutta, and in fact I'm going to refer to a couple of suttas. Suttas meaning the kind of original teachings of the Buddha as he gave them. But for now, I just thought we'd take a bit of time to actually have that experience of settling in together, maybe as we would in a shrine room, in a center. We'd gather together and just settle onto our spot. So what I'm going to encourage you to do, I mean, I don't imagine that everybody's sitting in meditation posture right now, but just as much as you can to be comfortable, just settling in, just doing what you need to do to be comfortable. You may want to close your eyes. And then just letting the sound of the bell take us into some quiet moments together. So just letting things settle. Having a sense of the weight really dropping, that we're not holding on to any effort right now, but just letting the weight drop and be taken up by the spot on which we're sitting. So we might not be directly sitting on the earth, but whether we're sitting on a chair or cushions or whatever, just feeling that the weight of our bodies is supported, and ultimately it is supported by the earth there beneath us. So we are just taking this time to ground ourselves, literally find our connection to the ground. And we can find our way to all the sensations of contact with the chair or cushion or wherever we're sitting. Find our way to those sensations as a way of knowing that that support is there, that the ground is supporting us. And of course, this is something that we can do at any time. When we're really feeling that need to connect, to know that we're not just holding all of this by ourselves, we can feel that support and those qualities of solidity and sturdiness of the earth beneath us. Just taking the time to tune in with them. So we're sitting on our little spot in our place, wherever we are, but of course there's the wider landscape around us. And we may be sitting in a city or in the countryside, so we can have a sense of our surroundings, but also knowing that within that wider landscape, here we all are, sitting together. For a little while, not putting into place those ideas of boundary or separation. Just here together, sitting together, sharing this space, as we in fact always are. And as we settle, feeling that support, having a sense of the space that we're sharing, perhaps also finding that the sensations of the breath are becoming more apparent. This precious breath coming and going. Each breath unique, just like us. So just a few more moments to feel these resources of groundedness, of space, of breath. And to really know that they are offered unconditionally. We don't have to be any particular kind of person in any particular kind of mood. Just us now, with however it is, connected to the earth, held by the space, and the gentle rhythm of the breath coming and going. These bodies breathing together. Okay, so I'm going to just drop in some interludes like that throughout our time together this morning. So we won't be doing a particularly long period of meditation as such, but just those little opportunities to drop in and drop down and just be together. Just be together. So I know that not everyone might know who I am, so just to say a little bit about that. My name's Sraddhadharani, and I live in the Scottish borders. I know on the information it said that I began my relationship with all of this with Buddhist practice in Manchester. But here I am. I'm in the Scottish borders now. I've been here for about 20 years, and I've been connected with Dharma Kosha for a very long time, almost as long as that. And in recent time, I've come to have the good fortune to be able to be part of what Dharma Kosha has to offer, having received that myself, and I still do when I go there on retreat for myself. But I also have the opportunity to offer something as part of what Dharma Kosha Retreat Centre has to offer, and it is a wonderful resource, and probably quite sad for people who were expecting to be on retreat there in the next while. Personally, I was supposed to be beginning a retreat next Friday, and that won't be happening, and who knows after that. But this is a fantastic way for us to still be able to tune into something of what Dharma Kosha has to offer. So I'm very grateful to all the effort that's gone into setting this up by the team there, and especially Kay. So this morning, I wanted to use two particular teachings by the Buddha to give us a way of just looking a bit more at what this situation is like for us personally, and if there's anything in those teachings that might be useful to us. So I'll be referring to the actual suttas, the verses, and also talking a little bit about my own experience too. So we're going to be looking at two suttas, and these are teachings of the Buddha that have been recorded, but as most of us will be aware, actually it was an oral tradition for many years. People didn't write things down at the time of the Buddha. So it was only a few hundred years later when, after a lot of effort by people to keep the teachings alive, things did begin to be recorded. And many of the suttas, the teachings begin with, "Thus have I heard." So there's no claim to anything there. There's just this sense of having heard something of benefit and wanting to pass it on. So in that spirit, that's kind of what I'm doing this morning. I'm not presenting anything as absolute. It's a kind of thus have I heard, and this resonated with me, and I hope that in some way it will resonate and perhaps be of help for others. So the two suttas this morning that I am going to be looking at a bit are the Bhayavana Sutta and the Karaniya Metta Sutta. So these two suttas, I hadn't really clocked at the time when I was thinking about them, really correspond with the core meditation practices that we do in Triratna. I know that people are joining today who will be very familiar with the practice tradition of Triratna, and for some people not. But just to say that the two meditation practices that people, when they first come along, will be introduced to are the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana practice. And metta bhavana means something like the cultivation of loving kindness. And what I hadn't really clocked when I picked these two suttas was that actually those are the remedies that are offered up as a way of being with difficult experience. So as I'll explain a bit more fully later, so mindfulness is what is presented to us in the Bhayavana Sutta as a way of being with difficult experience, and loving kindness is presented also as a way of responding to fear. And so this is referred to in the tradition as the remedy of mindfulness and the armor of loving kindness. And I kind of like that. I mean, armor sounds a bit warlike, but that sense of being protected by loving kindness is kind of what the Buddha was getting at. And I'll say a bit more about that when we look at particularly at that sutta. But for now, I want to move to the Bhairava Sutta, and I'm sorry I couldn't find a version of it with sometimes there's little marks on these words, so you kind of know how to pronounce them properly. So if anyone knows better than me and is thinking she's getting that all wrong, well, I'm really sorry, but I just couldn't find out. I couldn't, and I've not listened to actually any audio stuff, so I'm just giving it my best shot anyway. So it might be Bhairava. Could be, who knows. But just to say that I've got a Pali dictionary here at home, and I thought I'd just look up what those two words mean. So so Bhaya means something like fear or fright. It has connotations with what is dreadful, horrible and frightful. And Bhairava or Bhairava is kind of similar, really. So in a way, it's sort of double trouble. It's kind of scariness. And what I have heard this title translated as in the English is the Buddha's teaching on fear and dread, which is kind of what came to mind when I was thinking of what to offer this morning. So I just want to read a bit of the opening verse of that sutta, the fear and dread. I'm just going to call it the fear and dread sutta now, I think, so I don't have to kind of worry about pronunciation stuff. But the scene was set as it usually is in a sutta. So the Buddha was there with folk around him, monks and nuns around him, and people were approaching him with their questions. And so at the beginning of this sutta, some monks came to the Buddha and they said to him, Master Gotama, Master Gautama, it is not easy to endure isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. It is not easy to maintain seclusion, not easy to enjoy being alone. The forests, as it were, plunder the mind of a monk who has not attained concentration. So I'll just read that again. Master Gautama, it is not easy to endure isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. It's not easy to maintain seclusion, not easy to enjoy being alone. The forests, as it were, plunder the mind of a monk who has not attained concentration. So this is basically monks going to the Buddha who are probably living in quite remote, scary conditions and saying that they're finding it really hard. And so I think this is why this sutta came to mind for this morning, because, well, we might not be living in isolated forests or wilderness dwellings. And actually, in many ways, our conditions might be quite good. And I have to say that I do really appreciate where I find myself in the world at this point in time, in this situation, because although it's not without its difficulties, which we'll be looking at more together, actually there are many things about my circumstances that I feel very fortunate for. But I felt like I've needed to be clear with myself, and I'm just saying this, you know, to offer that appreciation of good circumstance doesn't offset the other stuff that comes up, because these are very particular circumstances. Most of us will never have experienced anything like this in our lives. And so we may not be literally in an isolated forest or wilderness dwelling, but we may be finding ourselves in circumstances or in a situation that actually is bringing up quite a lot of difficult feelings at times. When I'm speaking with people, what people seem to be saying is that they're really up and down with this, you know. They can be having good days and bad days, some days when it feels okay and others when it really doesn't. And it might be that that fear and dread isn't specifically what you would call your experience when things are difficult, but I imagine you can get the gist of what I'm getting at here, that these images of isolated forest and wilderness dwellings might not necessarily be a place, but they might represent states of mind. In fact, the little sentence there that the monk said to the Buddha was that these places plunder the mind of a monk who has not attained concentration. So what I've been noticing for myself over this time is that it feels easier to be with it when I'm steadier in myself, and I may not have attained full concentration, whatever that means, but there's certainly something about being a bit more focused and steady and with it. And the times when there's turbulence, when it just feels like I'm a bit all over the place, then those mental states that might be represented by living in a difficult place, an isolated place, those mental states are just as likely to arise in me as they might be elsewhere, even in the comfort of my own good conditions. So the interesting thing in this sutta is, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's quite long and it kind of is presented in a particular way. So I'm just picking out aspects of it. But anyway, the interesting thing is that the Buddha, um, in his reply to this monk, seems to be acknowledging that before his awakening, his enlightenment, you know, before he became the Buddha, then he basically says that he had the same kinds of experiences. But what he's very clear about is that following this experience of awakening or enlightenment, in those places that this monk describes, the Buddha doesn't have those experiences, and he knows that for himself. He knows that he can be in wilderness dwellings or isolated forests, and fear and dread does not arise in him. He's very clear about that. He says that he was undaunted about staying in those places. But the interesting thing about what happens next is that you would think he'd kind of go, well, that's great, you know, that doesn't happen for me. I'm fine, you know, I'm the Buddha. I can get on with doing other Buddha stuff, you know, without worrying about that. But actually what happens is that he feels that he still does have the potential to have those experiences of fear, of dread, of alarm, of not being settled in a place. So he actually decides to take himself to places that are more likely for him to have those experiences, which he describes as saying places that are awe-inspiring and make your hair stand on end. So he's talking about very remote places, and places that are quite likely to bring about an experience of fear. And within the tradition, some of us know this, the monks would take themselves to places like cremation grounds to sit, so that they really had to face whatever experiences came up in them and then work with them in meditation. And this was a practice that the Buddha seems to be taking on as a way of just really being clear about what's going on. So some of us are familiar with that image of the cremation ground as a difficult experience, something that we're sitting with that that is showing us something about our capacity to feel difficult things. And I just wanted to read a quote by Sangharakshita, who is talking about this experience of the cremation ground. He says, not only do you face fear in the cremation ground, there is also loneliness, and you come face to face with the possibility of insanity too. Sometimes you may feel as though your reason is breaking down, that you can't stand it anymore, you're cracking up. You have to come to terms with that possibility. In the cremation ground, you can take nothing for granted, not even your reason. For in the cremation ground, you finally come face to face with yourself, with your weaknesses and strengths, with who and what you are. And this is never a comfortable thing for the mind. So that's quite something. You finally have to come face to face with yourself, with your weaknesses and strengths, with who and what you are. And this is never a comfortable thing for the mind. So Sangharakshita also talks about the cremation ground representing a situation of crisis, which he also calls the crucial situation. And these crucial situations are when we're really challenged, you know, we're well out of our comfort zone. We cannot guarantee what state we're going to be in from one minute to the next. Even though our external circumstances might continue to be stable, there's an instability within us in the midst of that. And so all of these things, I think, give a flavour of where we find ourselves at this time, and some of the things that may be arising within us, the experiences that are arising within us. So the Buddha talks about when he goes to these scary places, he says things happen like peacocks making a twig fall. So you can imagine you're sitting in this place and then out of nowhere there's this rustling and shuffling and you just don't know what it is. There are wild animals going by, or the wind rustling dead leaves on the ground. And he says to himself at those times, is this that fear and terror coming? So it's like he's asking himself, am I frightened now? You know, is this it now? Is this going to be really, you know, is this going to be really a really hard experience for me? But there's something there about, he's asking himself the question, but he's not feeling it yet. And he actually goes on to say, why do I just keep waiting for fear? And it's almost like the fear of fear is a thing in itself. It's not just when it really does arise in response to something that's going on, but almost that fear that it might happen. And so he seems very clearly to be saying that he's still capable of experiencing those kinds of feelings. But what he does then go on to describe is that he knows very well what to do at that time when those feelings do arise in him. And he's also very clear that he's going to stay with it. So there are some parallels here with the Metta Sutta, because in this sutta, the Buddha talks about, he talks about subduing fear and dread, which is quite strong language. It's like he's just really not going to let it get the better of him. He's not saying it's not happening. He's actually gone to places where he knows it's likely to happen. But when it does happen, he's going to stay with it and work with it. And so he talks about subduing fear and dread in whatever situation he found himself in when it arose. So in both the suttas, he talks about the situation of sitting, of standing, of walking, and of lying down. So it's like all the kinds of things a body could be doing. This is when these experiences might arise. But he's just going to stay with it. He's going to stay with it. And that sequence of the positions of the body, what the body does also is referred to in the Metta Sutta, which I'll say a little bit more about in a minute too. So we can relate to that. You know, we're just going about our business. We might be in quite confined circumstances, but we will be standing, we will be sitting, we will be walking, we will be lying down. And at any point in time, difficult emotions can arise in us. And they might not specifically be to do with the situation as such. It might not even be very clear why they've arisen. But there's something in us that just knows this, I'm not feeling great right now, you know. However that manifests for us as the kinds of thoughts we're thinking, the kinds of sensations that are arising in the body, we just know we're not feeling okay. And at those times, it can get a bit overwhelming, especially when we just have the feeling that we just want it to stop. We don't want to feel like this. It's too much. And actually at those times, and I feel like I'm a bit, you know, this is a bit of a thing for me as much as anyone else. We're not staying with it until those feelings have subsided. We just kind of do something else, you know, we distract ourselves with other things. It may be that actually the reason that we're getting upset is because, you know, we're spending a lot of time thinking about things that happened in the past or worrying about things that might happen in the future. And that's just kind of compounding whatever this experience of our own version of fear and dread is. So just reminding us that the Buddha talked about the remedy of mindfulness. So, so the Buddha was very clear. I mean, as he was very clear that he didn't experience those states in some particular circumstances, he was also very clear that that he was unmuddled in his mindfulness. This is the words of the translation that I found. He was unmuddled in his mindfulness, and mindfulness was established in him. And he was talking about that in reference to why monks were experiencing these difficulties. And he actually, I don't know if I'll be able to find it now. I can't find it now, but anyway, in the translation, he was talking about monks that were so distracted that they didn't know if it was day or night. And he was saying very clearly, when it is day, I know it is day. And when it is night, I know it is night. So that's just a couple of sentences, but it really makes clear that what he's saying is that I know what is actually going on here. And I'm not getting lost in lots of other stuff. And here, just reminding us of the remedy of mindfulness. So I don't really want to say too much about mindfulness, because I think it's something that most of us, you know, we may or may not have a regular meditation practice, but we've all got some experience of what mindfulness means for us through various sources, I imagine. But he's very clearly saying that this is the remedy. This is the remedy for fear and dread. And in my own experience, what that has meant is that at those times when this all just feels a bit much, or I'm feeling a bit much for myself in response to this, just as we did at the beginning, you know, there are points of reference that I can come back to that just bring it back to now, bring it back to being present, bring it back to all the stuff that we kind of know actually, but especially in difficult times, I don't think we can be reminded. I personally can't be reminded often enough just to come back to what I can really know is going on, rather than this cloud of fear and dread that actually isn't very substantial in my direct experience. So all those little things that we've learned about, and we did a little bit just before about really feeling our feet on the ground, our contact with the ground, our feet or our wherever we're connecting, just letting those sensations really bring us back down, and actually just letting the senses bring us more fully into what's happening right now, because often what we're frightened of isn't what's happening right now. So the more we can stay with what's happening right now, actually, if the things that we're scared of do come about, we have that resource, we have that capacity just to come back and ground ourselves. So the Buddha said that he was unmuddled in his mindfulness. He was calm. And he also says that he was able to meditate very well. And then there's a big long list of how great his meditation was. And he attained this and he did that and he did the other. And at that point I was thinking, well, I'm not a Buddha, you know, so I'm not going to expect, you know, incredible meditation experiences out of this. But what I can get from it is that just finding a way of being still and quiet and grounded and tuned in is really helpful. And I think however we're taking this experience, at those times, anything that can help us feel a bit more resourced and steady is of great benefit. So I just kind of want to leave that there in terms of this sutta. So we can see this experience as a cremation ground experience at times. you know, just sitting with our own experience of ourselves can be very challenging. But there are resources of mindfulness, the remedy of mindfulness that we can bring to bear. And there are all kinds of ways that we can tune in with that. We might feel able to just do that for ourselves on the spot. We may need to find, you know, something like a led meditation online, or read something in a book, just something that helps us to remember, to kind of reintegrate a bit, to just settle ourselves. So let's just, before we move into looking at the Metta Sutta, let's just take a few minutes to do that a bit more. I've been speaking for a little while there, and I am going to speak a bit more in a minute. But let's just breathe together for a few minutes, just to settle. So again, those sensations of contact with the ground. Sense of sharing this space together. The breath in the body. And it may be that there are things happening in our sense experience that just bring us a bit more fully into what's going on right now. Maybe things that we can hear right now. Maybe we have our eyes open, so there are things we can see right now. And maybe even if our eyes are closed, we can see all those funny squiggles and wiggles that go on, shadow and dark. Just seeing what's there to be seen right now. All the sensations of touch in the body that are happening right now. Perhaps noticing temperature, pressure, air against the skin. And of course, the sensations of the breath coming and going. Okay, so I've got about 15 minutes now. I'm going to move on to looking a little bit at the Karaniya Metta Sutta now. As I was saying at the beginning, these two suttas kind of reflect the two core practices that we have in our situation. The mindfulness, we have the mindfulness of breathing, and the cultivation of loving kindness. And loving kindness referred to by the Buddha as the armor of loving kindness. So these are the two kind of core practices that we have as reflected in these two teachings. So when the Buddha was talking about going to scary places and you know, getting a fright because peacocks were snapping twigs and the wind was rustling dead leaves and so on, or it might even have been more gruesome than that if he was in meditation, if he was meditating in cremation grounds. Well, we're kind of having our own version of that. You know, it might not be a twig snapping, but it might be the latest thing we've heard on the news. It might be something that we've heard about someone that we care about becoming unwell. I'm sure many of us are, you know, we're concerned for our own health, but also the health of loved ones too. So that's our own version of those scary things, bringing up our own version of fear and dread or anxiety or worry. And so the teaching of the Karaniya Metta Sutta was also given by the Buddha in response to monks that came to him saying that they were frightened. But this time he wasn't talking about mindfulness in a specific way as he was in the last sutta, the Fear and Dread Sutta. He was talking more about cultivating the qualities of the heart as a way of being able to be with fear more. This is something that's always struck me, you know, that people came to him with these concerns and he was like, just cultivate the heart, cultivate your capacity for love, basically. And in a way, this becomes our armor, the armor of loving kindness, because it's almost like the more we have these capacities, the more resourced we are to be with these more difficult circumstances and feelings that can arise. So I'm not going to read the whole sutta, but just some of the things that he was that are introduced in the sutta are things like suggesting to the people that he was giving the teaching to that they be contented and easy to support, with few duties, living lightly. So in a way, we're kind of, for some of us, I know some people are kind of more out there in the world, but this is kind of being imposed on us, to live a more simple life, to live more lightly, because we haven't got the choices that we're used to. We may not have the duties that we're used to having, and for some of us that might be a relief, and for some of us actually it can be very disorientating to suddenly find that you cannot be in the world in the way that you used to be. And for myself, you know, I felt some grief about not being able to work in the way that I'm used to being able to work, you know, doing the things that I do as a massage therapist, as a meditation teacher, helping to lead retreats and so on. So I'm having to become more in alignment with what the Buddha is saying is a good thing anyway. So, but one of the things that strikes me here is that he's really encouraging us to cultivate a heart that that is able to have a sense of loving kindness for all the world. Loving kindness for all the world. Cultivate this mind without boundary, this heart without boundary. As many of us know, within the Buddhist tradition, there isn't a great separation between mind and heart in the way that we might be more familiar with the more Western conditioning, you know. So even though we're talking about mindfulness pertaining to the earlier sutta and this one more to metta, really there isn't a great separation in terms of cultivating our heart mind through these practices. Anyway, so he says, cultivate loving kindness for all the world, cultivate this mind heart without boundary. above, below, and outward, without obstruction, overcoming hatred and enmity. He says, let none cheat another or think scornfully of anyone, anywhere whatsoever. Then he goes on to say, though feeling angry or hateful, let none wish suffering upon another. And I think that's always struck me as very kind. It's like he's not saying, and you shouldn't feel these things. You know, he's saying, well, you might feel these things, you might feel angry, you might feel hateful, but don't let that then spill out into a way of responding, even just internally, that is hateful, that is angry, in a way that other people are going to suffer from. So again, this is a real call to practice, to cultivate that capacity. And we have the practice of the metta bhavana to do that, which obviously I'm not going to go into today. And there are other ways of cultivating loving kindness, which some of us may be more familiar with and feel more helpful. But just to emphasize that in whatever way we relate to this, you know, that we find a way of sustaining ourselves, sustaining our hearts more fully and more openly, then that can only be of benefit in these times. And just as the Buddha talked about subduing fear and dread in whatever position he was in the last sutta, he says in this sutta, whether standing still or moving, sitting or lying down, in every waking moment, establish well this mindfulness of heart mind. So again, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, if we find ourselves spinning off into fear, into anxiety, into difficult mental states, it can be just as simple as coming back and putting a hand on our heart, just bringing it back home, bringing ourselves back home to the heart, and perhaps doing those other things that help us to feel grounded and connected. And that might be something that we need to do umpteen times a day. It may not be possible for us to feel like we can sustain a proper, whatever that is, meditation practice at the moment. But just as we have done this morning, we can just find these ways of tuning back in when we need them, just becoming more and more familiar with what it takes to bring us back to presence, to heartiness, to connection with ourselves and with others. And I don't know what everybody's circumstances are. I don't know what will be called forth from any of us over this time. But these ways of resourcing ourselves, the more familiar we can become with them at times when it's maybe not so pressured, if there are even more difficult circumstances that arise, then we're more likely to be able to call on them rather than just hoping that they'll just happen. You know, if we're it's almost like if we want to find our way to a place, then we need to know the route, you know, so we can just familiarize ourselves in small ways over and over again with the route back to mindfulness as a remedy, the route back to a way of protecting ourselves, armoring ourselves with loving kindness. And it might not even be loving kindness in a way that feels like we think love should feel. You know, who knows what love's supposed to feel like, but we just know that we're maybe dropping down from everything that the head has to say into a more hearty way of connecting with what's going on right now. And that might just be with ourselves, never mind others or a wider situation. So those were the two suttas that I wanted to look at. I don't think I've got time really to go into any more. Just a flavour of them really, but just to, there's something very connecting there that, you know, this is a particular situation for us, but actually being human, being scared, being anxious, being worried, feeling all the difficult things that we might feel, even in the midst of being able to appreciate what we have got that's good for us, then that's a very shared human experience, you know, and that echoes across through the centuries, really, right back from the Buddha's time. So I just want to finish, actually. I want to share with you the Karaniya Metta Sutta, not in the actual language of the Buddha, because we don't really have a record of that, but in Pali, which, as far as we understand it, is as close as we get to the language of the Buddha. So I'm just going to finish in these last few moments. I'm going to chant the Karaniya Metta Sutta, so you can take this as an opportunity just to sit and listen and connect, and just hear a sense of the energy of that person all those years ago who had the interests of suffering beings at heart, suffering in the sense of all the difficult emotions that can arise, and who really cared enough to take the time to share something of his own experience, of his own thoughts around what we might find helpful. So I just hope that for everyone, in whatever way there has been something of benefit from some of what I've looked at today, and elsewhere, you know, in the wider resources that are available. Okay, so just sitting quietly. Karaniyang atta kusalena yantang santang padang abhisamecha sako ujucha sujucha suachocha samodo anatimani santu sakocha suparocha apakichocha sala ukauti santindriocha nipakocha apagapo kulesu ananugidho nacha kudang samachare kinchi yena vinyu pare upavadayong Sukino va kemino hontu sabe sata bhavontu sukitata yekechi panabutati tasavata varahava anabasisa dikava yemahantava Majjhima Saka Anukatula Ditava Yeva Adita Ye Chadure Vasahanti Abidure Bhuttava Sambhave Siva Sabe Sata Bhavantu Sukhitata Naparo parang nikubeta Nati manyeta kata chinam kanchi Biarosana patiga sanya Nanya manya sadukang ichaya Mata yata niang putang Ayusa eka putang anurake Evampi sababutesu Manasang bhavaye aparimanang Metang cha sabalokasmim Manasang bhavaye aparimanang Udhang adhocha tiryancha asambadhang averang asapatang titang charang nisinova sayanova yavatasa vigatamidho etang sating aditeya brahmane tang viharang idamaho ditincha anupagama silava dasanena sahampano kamesu vinaya gethang nahi jatu gabaseang punareti. Okay, well, I know I've gone a couple of minutes over. I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining today. Just wow, more people have joined while we've been online. There were a couple of things just that I've been asked to say. Just to a reminder that just to keep an eye on the Dharma Kosha website, because there are other things like this happening. There is a weekly program of events. And also, if you feel so moved to do, Dharma Kosha would really welcome your dana if you felt moved to offer anything. Obviously, retreats aren't able to happen at the moment, but there are still kind of overheads to keeping the situation afloat, so that hopefully at some point in the future, those of us who want to can go back and enjoy being on retreat there. So I think you can find those details also on the website. Kay might say more about that, being a bit more tuned in. But I just want to say, I mean, I think I'm going to just stay around for a bit anyway. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen next, but just to say thank you so much, just to be here with you all and see you all in your own little boxes, but in no box. The box of no box has been a real, it's been really something. So thank you. Go well.
Hi everyone, just to say that yeah, the link to make any donations if you're happy to do so is on the social media pages and on our website. So no matter how small it is, it's always very greatly appreciated. And yeah, just to say massive thank you for taking part. The online program has been great to run, and each week we're going to have regular slots and guest slots as well. Just a massive thank you, Sraddhadharani. That was really beautiful. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So what I'll do is I'm just going to change it to gallery view, and what it would be really nice to do is just as a farewell is just wave goodbye to each other. Bye everyone.
Bye. Elephant. Bye, elephant. Oh.